many speak of a vocation crisis in the Catholic Church. It is true that here in the Archdiocese of Omaha we have more parishes than priests, and the priests available to serve has gone down from past decades. In reality, though, not having enough priests for all of our parishes has been an issue from the very beginning of our Archdiocese. It is difficult to accept change, especially if that might mean not having Sunday Mass at one's own parish, an experience which more than 20 of our rural parishes are faced with in our Journey of Faith pastoral planning. This is in response to the current situation that we have more churches than priests and a declining population in our rural area. One might complain that we don't have enough priests for our rural parishes because the urban areas are stealing all of our priests away from us. However, even after implementing the Journey of Faith, rural parishes, which make up about 30% of the Catholic population of the Archdiocese, will still have 1/3 of the available priests. In actuality, not having enough priests for our parishes has been an issue from the beginning of our diocese. In 1857, the Vicariate Apostolic of Nebraska Territory was established by the Catholic Church. A Vicariate Apostolic is established in missionary territories where no diocese has yet been formed. When our first bishop, Bishop O'Gorman, arrived in 1859, the vicariate covered 357,000 square miles, including what is now Nebraska, northeastern Colorado, Wyoming, and parts of Utah, Montana, and the Dakotas. To cover this, Bishop O'Gorman had only 3 priests to assist him: Father Jeremiah Tracy at St. John's City in Dakota County, Benedictine Father Francis Cannon in Nebraska City, and 1 Jesuit missionary priest, Father Adrian Hoken, among the Native Americans in Montana, northwest of Great Falls. Bishop O'Gorman did not waste any time addressing the manpower shortage and ordained Father William Kelly on June 25, 1859, in Omaha City. Considering the land area, this would mean an average of 89,000 miles per priest. And at that time, there were only 2 church buildings, one in Omaha City and one at St. John's City. O'Gorman wrote, "In many parts of the country, Catholics never see a priest, and I have been in some places where the bishop was the first to administer the comforts of religion to the people. Here, Catholics are greatly exposed. Those among whom they live have no religion at all, or a false one, and many of the Catholics have very little themselves and are in continual risk of losing that little for the want of someone to break to them the bread of life. Still more destitute is the condition of the Indian tribes, an immense number of human beings wandering through those almost impenetrable tracts, without a shepherd and feeling the necessity of one, and calling continually for a guide to lead them to the Great Spirit." One can hear in his voice an echo of that of our Lord's. At the sight of the crowds, his heart was moved with pity for them, because they were troubled and abandoned, like sheep without a shepherd. By 1861, the vicariate numbered 8 diocesan priests and 4 regular visiting priests. Besides St. Mary's Cathedral in Omaha and St. John's in Dakota County, 4 other churches were being erected, and there were 8 stations occasionally attended by visiting priests. When Bishop O'Gorman died in 1874, the vicariate had 19 priests, serving 12,000 Catholics in 20 parishes and 56 missions. That's an average of 4 locations per priest, 18,000 square miles per priest, 631 Catholics per priest. During this time, the Blessed Sacrament was reserved in churches and chapels where the priest either resided or from which he would not long be absent. When Bishop James O'Connor arrived in 1876, 26 priests were scattered over the area, and he felt that at least 20 more priests were needed to adequately carry out the work of the vicariate. In the more populous eastern states, O'Connor thought, 1 priest per 1,000 Catholics was sufficient. But for the scattered communities of Nebraska, the minimum should be 1 priest per 500 Catholics. The Archdiocese of Omaha did actually reach 1 priest per 400 Catholics in the 1950s, and remained below 1 priest per 500 Catholics until the mid-1970s. Now we are at about 1,000 Catholics per priest level. Notice that O'Connor felt the need for 1 per 500 due to the isolation of distance that the difficulty of travel made for that time. Perhaps seeing our greater mobility today, he would consider Nebraska to be sufficiently served by 1 priest per 1,000 that he felt was adequate for the eastern states. Since immigration was bringing an ever-growing population to Nebraska, Bishop O'Connor needed to make provisions for the future in response to a, quote, increasingly critical shortage of priests. For him, money was the issue in being able to provide enough priests. O'Connor therefore instituted an annual collection for seminary education, a practice that we continue to have in our archdiocese today. Like our seminarians now, young men then studied in seminaries out of state. Many priests came from Europe, where the immigrants were coming from. Most of these pioneer priests were Irish and German, several Bohemian and French. Priests came out of Catholic families, so it was only right that our early priests came from the homeland where Catholic families were coming from. By 1886, there were 91 priests, 72 secular, and 19 religious. We did not start having enough priests until our priests began coming from Nebraska itself. Native-born priests from our own parishes and families living here. Some parishes today may boast of half a dozen priestly vocations or more, and a dozen women religious. But our parishes have often utilized the ministry of 20 or more priests throughout the history of their existence. Every parish must reflect, when was their last vocation produced? When was their most recent native son ordained? For example, in our family of 7 parishes, we have been served by 157 different priests through the years, but have given back only 22 men to the priesthood. For some parishes, their most recent native-born priest is nearing retirement, has already retired, or has already passed on to his eternal reward. Parishes of a diocese cannot cease to bring forth their own priest and still expect to have enough for Sunday Mass at every church. The population of the rural areas in the Archdiocese would increase through the 1920s, though following that would steadily decline. The population of our rural areas today is less than it was in 1890. And so too, it seems, our priest numbers have returned to that time as well. In the next episode, we will consider what life looked like for the early pioneers.